Hey everyone, Jay Whitner here with Space Headlines. We do a quick recap every week of what's going on in space. And today we're going to be talking about the third week of September 2018. Our first item is a little bit historic. It's about the Delta II rocket. Delta II has been flying since the late 80s and went off with their final mission of Delta II without a hitch. 100 successful flights in a row, and the mission was launching ICESat-2. So Delta II was originally put together by McDonnell Douglas, and I think the first launch was in 1989. One of the most successful flight operations histories of any rocket, with a 99% success rate on 156 launches. So congratulations to all the people that were involved through the decades with Delta II. The SpaceX president, Gwynne Shotwell, says that she thinks we're going to see the first flight tests of the upper stage of BFR late next year. This is the spaceship part of the two-stage setup. This is probably going to look a lot like the early Grasshopper test that they did in Texas for Falcon, was starting with very short flights, maybe 1,000 feet up, and gradually increasing altitudes and speeds as things move on. Some of the things they're going to be looking at specifically are, can this thing land on unprepared territory? So initial missions to the moon or Mars, there's not going to be any landing pad there. So that's an open question in terms of the vehicle. Also, the aerodynamics of the vehicle. Is everything operating as anticipated? But great news that Gwynne Shotwell, who perhaps is a more conservative voice in SpaceX management, thinks that next year is quite feasible. The big news for the week was a press meeting, a press briefing that was put on by Elon Musk. And the purpose was to announce the first moon tourist. So the idea here is that a BFR will fly around the moon, sort of like the Apollo 8 mission. And this was the big announcement. It's a Japanese billionaire, and his name is Yusaku Maezawa, who runs a big online apparel business out of Japan. One of the really exciting things that he was announcing is he's chartering the whole ship, the whole BFR, and he's going to bring 6-8 artists along with him to expose them to space flight and visiting the moon, although, at some distance, they're not going to be landing on the moon. But a very exciting mission. There's going to be a ton of press involved with this. The mission timing is aimed for 2023 to do this tourist mission around the moon. And it's going to be really exciting. Also in the briefing, Mr. Musk talked about some enhancements to the BFR since he spoke about this in Australia. And I'll speak to a few of those points in just a couple of minutes. Boeing and SpaceX are saying that they are now ready in terms of safety and reliability for commercial crew that are ready for the NASA standards. In general, the specification for NASA standards is they want the probability of loss of the crew on a mission to be no higher than once out of 270 missions. As far as I'm aware, no crewed spacecraft or uncrewed spacecraft, for that matter, has ever achieved that level of reliability. That's been a big hurdle. Both companies are saying that they now are ready to meet that test. And what NASA is saying is they're trying to review the data from the two companies to make sure they understand, how they came to these conclusions. But certainly good news that at least the companies think that they are ready for this very stringent level of safety for these upcoming commercial crew flights. Interesting news about Ceres. The asteroid was visited by the Dawn spacecraft, and scientists, of course, as they always do, have been poring over the data ever since. And there's this conclusion that there's lots and lots of ice volcanoes on the asteroid, with one of them, in fact, being 2.5 miles high, which is a pretty dramatic situation. So they also think, the scientists, that it's likely that there are similar features on other moons in our solar system. But the news particularly is about Ceres, lots of big ice volcanoes. Space debris is a big problem. There are roughly 20,000 pieces of space debris flying about above our head, and they're all moving at very, very high speeds. You have to be in orbit, so each one represents a danger to spacecraft, satellites, anything that's up there doing work could be impacted by a piece of this debris. So different companies are looking at what can be done about this. This is a test. The news item was a net was used to test capture a very small satellite to see how that approach would work. The bottom line is that this British test worked very well. It's called the Remove Debris mission, which is pretty understandable. They had their device used cameras and LiDAR to track where this little satellite was and captured it. So this is great news. So this would perhaps be a good strategy to use for smaller satellites. And the next question would be, how will you deorbit or collect the debris once you've captured it? That was not something they were trying to do in this first test. This was focused purely on the capture of the item. And on to the BFR. People have been ruminating since the announcement about this tourist moon mission on what Elon said about the enhancements of the BFR. So toward the end of the week, there was a piece that sort of summarized some of these things. The revised BFR is taller. It's about 40 feet taller than the version that he described in Australia. And the design is a little bit different. If you look at the image, it's a little bit difficult to see from this angle, but there are fins toward the front that help with the aerodynamics and maneuvering of the ship. And there's not a separate landing system from the fins. The fins, 2 of the 3 fins have an aerodynamic function, so they're moving as the fins on the front can move as well. And 1 of the 3 fins, it looks the same, but it really does not move to help the aerodynamics. It's more of a leg. So right now there's a landing pad at the base of each of those things. The upper stage, the spacecraft part, is bigger than it was before, and it has consequently more pressurized volume. So now the volume inside the new BFR version is noticeably more volume than the pressurized volume in the International Space Station. They're projecting it's going to be roughly 15% larger volume than we have on the ISS. And that means that it's a reasonable amount of space to accommodate quite a number of passengers, crew, and cargo. That's it for Space Headlines for the 3rd week of September 2018. Very exciting news from SpaceX on all fronts, and we'll see what happens in the balance of September. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.